Hey guys, today I'm going to go over, I guess it's part two of the reasons that we see that people don't make it through selection, have a hard time with it, all these sort of things, and coming from a place of experiencing it firsthand as a student, experiencing it firsthand as cadre, and now experiencing it firsthand as a coach and all those sort of things, and seeing and auditing and hearing why people specifically don't make it or do. And there's some kind of potential overlap in the last video did, but not. You'll see there's some differences here, and I'll try to lay that out with you. Okay, so these are no particular order, and there certainly might end up being part three to this, because it's just we kind of accumulate these thoughts, and sometimes these things are just like one or two times, but the ones that I'm listing are chronic. When people fail selection, these are the reasons why. Okay. The first one that I've got on here, again, it's there's so many people, for some reason, I know why, like there's such a focus on endurance. My experience has been runners, triathletes, ultramarathoners, CrossFitters do very poor. In the same way, powerlifters do really bad in selection. Bodybuilders do really bad in selection. All these very specific type sport movements, when all they do, because again, one of the problems last time is people work to their strengths. People come from these sports and they continue to work towards those strengths. And even runners keep, like, the biggest thing we see with runners is they're so upper body weak, right? And same with swimmers. Swimmers have this really lower body, these lower body issues that create a lot of trauma. And so, whatever is being advertised from these organizations to run X miles a week, like I think that they're super unethical. The 30 to 40 miles a week that's advertised is criminal, in my opinion, and it's only coming from people that don't have any experience in it. They're just arbitrarily throwing this nonsense out at 30, 40, and even more miles a week, and I think that it's so wrong. It just breaks my heart that people are running that much. It's ridiculous. If you're exceeding, if you're running between 7 to 12 miles a week, that's a lot, especially because you don't run that much in buds. You run once a week. You shuffle from place to place, and like that's the thing, is like there's this contribution of like you run so much at buds, but that only comes from the poor performers. None of those guys are the tier 1 dudes, or mostly comes from the people that fail buds. This advice is perpetuated. So running and ultra marathoning and all that stuff is just nonsense. It's a joke. And then along with that, there's this sense that there needs to be this ideal body weight. Right? From a standpoint of physics, the ideal body weight is the body weight in which you can propel, stop, and maintain a state of acceleration with the most consistency. That's the mathematical answer. And when you train properly, you become that. You become this well-trained, this athlete that can really, they've gone above and beyond their ability to handle this load. And that's, it ranges, right? Who does really bad at buds, right? People under about 130, 140 pounds. There's no chance. Guys that exceed maybe 220 that have, but I've seen guys at 260, right? But they're 6'5", 6'6". So you can't say that there's this weight. If I were to take an average of the guys going through buds, they're probably around 175, 180, I would imagine. I was 192 to 200 the whole time I was in buds. So I think that not being focused on a weight, right? In the same way we don't be focused on these PST reps. Like you get so point focused as well, or number focused, and that's when you focus so much on the PST, you don't actually develop any sort of physicality for selection, right? And that becomes a problem. Kind of this is a piggyback from one of the first lists, but this one is people really fail to prioritize. Like you say, they don't recover well these things, but they don't prioritize them, and they don't implement them in their training before going. A lot of people hear what we say about foam rollers, lacrosse balls, supplements, and they're like, oh, I'll do it when I get there. The same problem is like if you're going to go run a marathon, you don't want to buy a pair of shoes off the shelf and go run in this brand new pair of shoes. In the same way, you don't want to not have practiced, not have prioritized these means of recovery, because then you find out what works for you, and you find out things that don't work for you. You find out like, well, this recovery modality works really well, but I can't take it with my buds. This one doesn't work well. Like, you'll know that going in, right? So you need to prioritize that. And that's the kind of same thing as the next one is in the same way of practicing, people fail to prioritize and practice good sleeping, right? They're like, oh, I'll be super tired when I don't have to worry about sleeping. The two things that get people out of buds from a physiological standpoint the fastest is loss of appetite, right? And loss of sleep. So that loss of appetite and loss of sleep happens to most people right away because of stress. If you haven't managed that stress here when you're a civilian, you don't have a chance of managing that when all these new things are happening, and nobody can initiate a prioritized sort of way of going about it having never practiced it. It creates more failure is what it does. Okay, so sleep is huge, right? And like that's where people they sleep deprive themselves. That is ridiculous. What they should be doing is prioritizing sleep hygiene. That's the way through. If you want to manage and deal with sleep deprivation, you learn how to prioritize it. Okay, so you maximize your sleep quality when you know the sleep quantity is probably not going to be there on purpose. Okay, because these sleep deprivations in our selection are on purpose. The cadre, the institution is doing it on purpose. We don't have to right? We don't have to be guessing on how to deal with that because we can practice sleep prioritization. That's huge. Okay, I think this one's really interesting because it's kind of a piggyback of last time, but at no point will our United States military prepare you physically. There is no one in our military, especially in the boot camp level, especially in the A school level, and especially the buds prep. No, there's no one at that level that has the understanding and certainly has no experience in doing what we're talking about. So the last thing you want to do is rely on our military to get you physically ready. Because the thing is you probably thinking, oh man, I'm going to have these really amazing, super fit soldiers training me. The most intelligent, the most amazing, the most thoughtful, the most violent, the most awesome humans I've ever met were in our military. But the other spectrum of lazy, useless, whatever, I've seen that too. And that's what you typically get. And those super lazy, incompetent people in our military are going to be in charge of your whatever. So maybe we should prioritize it ahead of time, have practiced it, and then we have to worry about that, okay? I think a big thing is for me and for other people, and I get this all the time, is you need to, this is kind of I kind of off in left field a little bit. People that do not have friends outside of the military struggle because they don't have an emotional break. So my suggestion is, if you have really good friends before coming in, stay in contact with them, right? Don't think that you're not trying to get them to understand the situation. Those people probably understand you better. And so it's a good thing to make friends outside the military, keep friends outside the military, so you can get a break from that military way of living because it's overwhelming at times, right? Especially in the early selection phases where you're locked into the classroom, you're every day, just to get away. I think it's a really good idea. Okay, this is huge. This is a huge no-no. Do not train in boots. Don't run in boots, don't ruck in boots, if you want to get a pair of boots or you have a pair of boots already and you want to see how they negatively impact you in running and rucking, do it. But I want you to understand, if you put a boot on, it is going to be impossible for you to optimize. Not going to happen. Can't do it, right? The boot in itself is a nulling performance factor. So we want to train in things that give us the performance value. And then we get to selection, you'll have the leg, ankle, and foot strength to accommodate that really crappy boot. But also, there's a way to lace it. There's a very proper way to lace it. And we have the video circulating on that as well. Okay? The big one, again, we see all the time is people take the PST all the time. Kind of touched that before, but it's worth repeating. And they take it all the time, but here's the second part of it. Most people, it seems they only train for the PST. They have no concept of the work volume they're going to have to do after. So all they do is number drive. No, all they do is train for this PST, and that's ridiculous. The PST is in no way, shape, or form correlated to success. It's not even correlated to failure. Why? Because every single person that's in buds has passed the PST. So there's not a whole lot of value to that. Okay, honestly, when you're really pushing, especially if you're not keeping track of those numbers, and they don't, right? So no one gives a shit what your PST numbers are in the teams. Why? Because they're not using them, okay? The big one too, kind of with boots. The boots is a problem, man. Finning. Most people don't fin. All they do is practice the side stroke. And you very rarely do the combat side stroke in buds. Right? You're doing open ocean swimming with fins. And when you're in the pool, it's the same thing. Right? The vast majority of your work is going to be with fins and should be. And if it's not, that's probably why you're going to get or have shin splints. Okay. I think this is kind of like the big one that we see most people that transition from college and the military is that people continue to persist like they're in the college lifestyle. If you've been to college, you know, and if you're, you know, college can be difficult, but if you're squared away, college is not hard. It's not hard at all. But I was never a partier in colleges. But we get a lot of those guys. Got a lot of guys on the weekends that still think that drinking like a dipshit is a good idea. Drinking yourself into oblivion, using drugs, all those sort of things, like not a good idea. It's not a good success rate for people that still persist on drinking their whatever. Just drink it on the weekends, man. What are we doing here? If you can't hold back on your social engagement for 6 to 7 months while you're going through the selection, the community doesn't need any more alcoholics. You don't need any more any of that, okay? So that's my suggestion, because that's a real common thing, and now it's chronic. So fix yourself before you come in. So here, guys, is a list. Again, I'm sure it's going to grow and keep going, but here is part 2 of the reasons why we see the most failure, right? Most failure in selection, the most failure in buds, but these are the things that we see, and they are chronic.